Welcome to the 5am grind. We're pleased to bring you an interview today with a guest whose name is Tim Brady. Tim is somebody who's a pretty young entrepreneur. He essentially graduated from university, worked in finance for a little while at RBC and then at a hedge fund, then finally got the opportunity to buy a company outright. He was looking for a software company, finally got a company to buy, and he decided to go all in, quit his job, buy a certain company, and then now he's running that particular company. I think this interview is quite interesting because a lot of people think that there is really only one way to entrepreneurship, and that is that you need to come up with an amazing idea and then quit your job and then start. But here is somebody who took a completely different approach, and instead of going out and starting something from the ground up, he decided to go out there, buy a company that he liked and that was suitable to his criteria and his standards. And now he's become a full-time entrepreneur.
Yeah, and it's a great example for all of you young entrepreneurs who think that either you're not ready or you're too young. All you got to do is dive in.
Dive in, jump in. So I hope you guys enjoy this interview. Welcome to the 5am grind. We're pleased to welcome Tim Brady to the podcast. Tim, welcome to the podcast.
Hey guys, thank you. Pleasure to be here. Excited about it.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. So I wanted to ask you, for those of our listeners who don't know Colligo, is it Colligo or Colligo? Am I pronouncing that
It's whatever you want to call it, but Colligo works just fine.
Colligo. All right. Could you explain what your company does?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we build applications that integrate the Microsoft 365 suite. So as you know, 85% of organizations in the world use some form of Microsoft product, right? Mostly SharePoint, Office 365. So we build applications that sit on top of that and actually make the Microsoft suite a lot more usable and accessible. We do that through a few products, but that's the general crux of what we do. So
fantastic. So Tim, what we're going to do today is then cover some background type questions just about your career, your company, how'd you get involved, all that good stuff. And then we'll move on to some success habits questions as well. So just for your background, so going back to when you were a kid in your childhood, what was that like? Did you grow up in Toronto?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
And I actually I grew up in a super entrepreneurial household. Both my parents entrepreneurs, so grew up, around that environment, and we were the kids at a young age, opening up the lemonade stand, and then that evolved into the lawn mowing business, and I think I sold water filters in high school. I'd import water filters from the U.S., sell them to everyone in the neighborhood and on the street, and that was really just always wanted to improve processes that were out there and try and build some form of a company. And obviously that evolved quite a bit, and those were a lot of fun, but very entrepreneurial household, kind of ingrained in me at a young age that you can do whatever you want to do and go out and just build stuff. So
fantastic. What did your mom and dad do, if you don't mind sharing?
Yes, they were both in the financial services industry,
Okay.
so they independently built their own firms, and so very good, role models to grow up around if you want to be entrepreneurial one day and see what it takes, and the kind of dedication and commitment and hard work that it takes to build something. So
we talk about this often, how one of the downsides for growing up, like for us, was that our parents weren't entrepreneurial enough. And so a lot of it was us trying to figure it out later on in life, and if only you could start earlier. I guess with you, what was one of the biggest benefits of having parents that were entrepreneurial? Like, what was one lesson that they taught you early on that kind of stuck with you?
Yeah, well, it's a pretty long list. I think first one that comes to mind is hard work. So my dad built his insurance company from basically zero into a fairly big company, and it was just hard work. I remember, as kids, it would be Saturdays we'd go to the office with him because he was working there, and of course we were playing video games on the computer and trying to figure out this internet thing, which was brand new at the time, and and playing games on the floppy disks and all that. But that was it, right? Seeing the hard work. It's mornings, nights, evenings, weekends, So I think that was one of the big ones. The other thing is just discipline, right? I mean, we were brought up to, you got to go work for whatever you want. Nothing's given to you. And to their credit, I mean, it rubbed off my brother, sister as well, both, very successful in their own domains. And I think that, came from our parents, just seeing the hard work and what it takes to actually build something. And I mean, we all know the statistics around how many businesses actually end up being viable entities and survive over the long term. And try and replicate a lot of that as I, build Colligo here and make it a durable, long-lasting Canadian software company. So
that's fantastic. So fast forward then. So you grew up in Toronto, a lot of entrepreneurial influences from your parents. You decided to go to business school. You did finance, is that right?
It is, yeah. So I went to the Ivy Business School and took the finance route out of school. It was the best place to learn a ton about the world, in my opinion. Went and worked at RBC and was able to work for some tremendous mentors there, which really kind of shaped the trajectory for my career. So I always had the affinity for technology and software, and was able to get into the software group at RBC, and then took that after a few years and went to a investment firm, Picton Mahoney in Toronto. Was able to really participate and invest in a lot of companies there on the technology team, and again worked for just an incredible mentor. Really helped shape who I became over time, and then when the opportunity came about to go and build my own company, Olbia Software, which parent company of Colligo, I lunged at it and decided this was the one, and went all in on it. And that was kind of the path that led there from business school.
So I really like that. And I wanted to zoom into that story because it's quite interesting, because you had you would say, very traditional career path. You graduated, did well in school, I assume. That's why you landed a pretty good gig at RBC, and then worked for an investment management firm. So I wanted to zoom in a bit. So why did you decide to go into finance? Was it just because your parents were in it already, or you thought it'd be a good career? Did you ever think when graduating that, you know what, screw the finance route, I'm going to start my own business? Did that thought cross your mind?
It certainly crossed my mind at various points, I'm sure. No, I did have a business I was running during university as well, and it didn't gain enough product market fit to really lead to anywhere that was going to support a career. And I was eager to learn and figure out more about the world. And I did, quite frankly, I loved the markets too. It was kind of that I was torn between loving the entrepreneurial side, but also wanting to take on the finance world and go learn as much as I could there. And I figured, that you have a window to go and do that. Entrepreneurship and building a company was something I could always do whenever I felt it was the right time. So I went all in on the finance side, and I was lucky enough to end up at a good firm with great people at RBC out of school. And but it was something that was always nagging at me, right? And you could call it less traditional. I like the wording used there. I think the other way is to think about it is, I was privy to meeting with hundreds of CEOs, right, as part of the role, and that continued at Picton Mahoney. And it was, figuring out what makes the companies that are durable, are successful, are high growth, like what makes them go versus the ones who are less successful, and really being able to dial in what's the differentiating factors and what's it take to strategy wise to make a company successful. And definitely, I mean, a lot of founders of startups and high growth companies definitely come from the product side for sure, but I think you need to try and understand both sides, and everybody takes a different path. And I think the one that I took kind of set me up well for exactly what I'm doing now. So,
got it.
So you said within your experience with your firms, your professional experience, you met a lot of CEOs, and you kind of got an insight that a lot of people wouldn't. So what was kind of your biggest takeaway from seeing all these founders and CEOs running their businesses that kind of had an impact on you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really boiled down to every great company that I met with in the software domain, and there was hundreds, right? Everyone has a different setup of their organization, but it really comes down to having a great product first. You can fake it all the way along with a great sales and marketing organization, but if you don't have a great product, that only gets you so far. It's, the companies that I always looked up to, it was, a lot of them are part of this new product led growth movement, where the products essentially are self-serve and sell themselves in a sense. But I think really to get a flywheel going, and I'm a big believer in flywheels for creating durable competitive advantages for companies over time, I think you need a great product. That's first and foremost. Then you need to build a great sales and marketing motion around that. I do think, the whole sales motion kicks off with marketing. It's a marketing led motion that makes companies successful. And I think that none of, you kind of work through the different functional groups, but you need a good product, right? That's what gets you in the game. It needs to be 10x your competitors. It needs to be, as hard as that is at all times to quantify, right? Are we 5x, are we 15 right now? But and it changes. It's very dynamic. It's by no means static at all. But it starts with the product, and then you need to build the sales and marketing org around that. And it takes all the pieces to really build a successful company.
Yeah, but for sales and marketing though, did you take any of those courses in undergrad, or was this something that you learned once you got out?
Yeah, totally. It took sales, or there's not really a course for sales, right? But I think sales is like a naturally developed skill that you're always kind of selling, right? Even when you're in university and you're recruiting for your first job, and then at your first job, it's sales is, I think, you can do things to coach yourself and practice and all that, but it really comes from experience and just trying new things, and you're kind of building that throughout your whole life. Marketing, I mean, I think every business student in Canada has to take some form of marketing course. That's by no means my strong suit, and that's why I have to build a great team around me. We have a phenomenal VP marketing on our team, and I realize that's one of my weaker areas. But to answer your question, like I certainly took all the courses in general business area that you could take. So
nice.
One of the things, and I just wanted to add to that, one of the things that I'd complain about was none of the business schools have any kind of real sales courses or anything that ties marketing into sales.
So funny enough, on this very topic, believe it or not, but Ivy, the school you went to, Tim, actually has a professor of sales. They, I think, hired him quite recently. So because they've realized, because a lot of the alumni, the students said, this is arguably the most important skill set in business, sales, and it's not thought. Yes, you learn it indirectly, like you just said, because you sell yourself when you're meeting, like you're anything, right? You're meeting a friend, you're selling yourself. You're meeting your spouse, you're selling yourself. You're going for a job, you're selling yourself. You're doing it all the time. Totally. But finally, I think they've seen the importance of having a sales course at the school. So I thought that was quite interesting.
For sure. Yeah, no, it's amazing. I think I saw that as well, and I thought it was fantastic, and it's so true, right? And finding someone who is good in sales, they're really hard to find good salespeople. There's no generally accepted curriculum for it, and I think it's fantastic that because you're seeing it with the gig economy, and tech becomes a bigger part of Canada's economy, but globally the economy. You're seeing these massive software companies just bring on tons of salespeople and put them through rigorous training programs. Well, if that was something in university as well, I think it would be beneficial to Canada, but just the overall economy as well.
Yeah, fantastic. So Tim, just zooming into your background then, and to the extent that you can share. So basically you worked at RBC, went to Picton Mahoney, and then when did you sort of decide to be like, okay, I'm going to start my own software company, and then I'm going to try and buy another one? How did that come about?
Yeah, for sure. It was really, it was opportunistic. So I had certainly been keeping my eyes open for something I found interesting. And it was really when I came across something that it really was a two-pronged thesis, right? So SharePoint was becoming more central to Microsoft's platform. It was becoming the core of the platform. And not a lot of people realize this. A lot of people, if you rewind 3 years, I'm going to say 4 years ago, people thought SharePoint was becoming kind of this silo on its own, and Microsoft might not even make a new version of it at some point. And just through my channels, research, looking at product roadmap, I saw that SharePoint was actually becoming more central to everything Microsoft was doing in the Microsoft 365 suite. And so, if you think of SharePoint, what it really is, it's a repository, right? It's a content, it's the content hub of the enterprise. It does a lot more, but at a nuts and bolts level, it's where you save your enterprise's content. But with the emergence of Teams, Teams is really just a skin on SharePoint, make SharePoint more usable. So when you interact or send a file with a colleague over Teams, that file actually gets saved to SharePoint. That conversation gets saved to SharePoint, and so it's really powerful, right? And so I saw this as like the layer underlying Microsoft 365 and wanted exposure to it. I'd spent most of my time in the investing side in the content services, content management space, observing names like OpenText, Microsoft, and you name it. And so had a pretty good understanding of the space, was able to learn a ton about the roadmaps and what was happening in the industry. And then the second thing was cloud, right? So I was looking for a company that was really levered to the cloud and had a good opportunity there. At Colligo, there was, the cloud was only just a real burgeoning opportunity. The company has hundreds, if not thousands, of customers at the time of acquiring it, and a really strong brand name, strong history, great customer service, great people, and I thought I could really be that driver to shift the company towards the next 10, 15, 20 years, and bring us into a cloud first company. And that's really, been my focus and what I've done. And that was why I wanted to get involved with Colligo and come in and drive that next leg. So it was really looking at those two things, right? The cloud opportunity and SharePoint that led me to Colligo. And I had to go for the opportunity when I saw it. And yeah.
Yeah, whenever, so I get people asking me when they're starting a business, because they're trying to figure out what services to take on, whether it's G Suite or basically most of the time it's G Suite or Microsoft. I always say Microsoft because our firm would not be able to grow as quickly if it wasn't for SharePoint. The way SharePoint and Teams, all of it come together and how seamless it is. It's like just a repository, being able to disseminate knowledge between everybody in the firm, just having everybody work together. I don't think there is a product that's even close to SharePoint right now in the market.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're bang on. It's nothing against G Suite, right? Google puts out some great products, and very cloud centric. But for the enterprise scale and delivering what the enterprise needs, I mean, the Microsoft suite is far ahead of all the others, and the numbers the numbers share the story quite well. Like Microsoft's adding like 8 million users per quarter, and the number two, I guess, Box would be adding about 2 million a quarter, right? And so the gap just keeps widening between Microsoft and the other applications.
I mean, it
is interesting though. Yeah. At the ground level, if you are starting a company, I mean, the whole public cloud in general has lowered the bar of what it takes to start a company. Anyone can go, tap a credit card, pay $100 and get up and running on AWS or Azure. And it definitely at the very small company level, they're all great, right? Microsoft can deliver just as good of an experience to the small business as they do to the enterprise, but Google offers some obviously great products at the small business level as well, as does Box and Dropbox. And there's certainly, I think, where the differentiators really kick in as the companies start to scale, and they need something like Teams to standardize on and communicate and share files across the organization, and not have 15 different applications for Zoom for video and Slack for chat, and they just want one to do it all and make sure that content ends up in the secure place at the end of the day. So,
I mean, if you have like 10 different programs that you're using, each program independently may be secure, but I find like it's a headache trying to manage all those passwords. People are going to be writing them down somewhere. It's going to be, for me, that's one of the biggest like security issues too. With our law firm, one of the biggest things is everything needs to be secure. Teams is also in terms of encryption and everything, it's far ahead of Zoom or anybody else. So that is another added, Zoom had, I think, people kind of bombing. I'm not
In the beginning,
anti-Zoom, right?
yeah.
I love Zoom.
We're doing this on
Right?
Zoom.
Yeah,
too.
we're doing this on Zoom as well. And it's not like Microsoft's paying me for this, but I feel like anybody who has any kind of ambition when they're starting a business, it's just a no-brainer. There's an absolutely no-brainer.
Yeah.
For me, whenever because a lot of people will come and they'll be like, why not G Suite? Again, I have nothing against with G Suite. And a lot of people have Gmail. There's not as many people with Outlook or Hotmail anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody's like, okay, the natural kind of next step is G Suite, but it's nowhere near what Microsoft has.
Interesting.
This has turned into an advertisement, but still.
We'll go segue away.
Yeah.
We'll get away from the Microsoft conversation. So Tim, I like your story because, you know, we have entrepreneurs on the show, and a lot of people know the common narrative about entrepreneurs. That is that you find a great idea, you start it, you have great success, you know, and that's the story that really is portrayed in the media. Yours is quite interesting because it's the other path, the lesser known one, but could be equally as rewarding. And that is you go out there, you buy a business and then run it. And then you become an entrepreneur effectively. When you sort of bought Colligo, walk us through that process. What was that process like of buying the company in terms of just, I guess, raising financing, due diligence, all of that process? Could you walk us through it just at a very high level?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I was fortunate enough to have built somewhat of a track record at the prior firm. And so when it came time to go and acquire the company, had certainly had a few backers who stepped up and said, "Hey, yes, if you know, we'll back you on this acquisition if you can pull it off." And all from all different backgrounds, different areas, and so that was fantastic, right? Because you're kind of going into the unknown a little bit when you put your you go through the LOI process and then through the purchase agreement process and diligence process. But it was good to at least know that we had the financial backing from several parties that were willing to come to the table if we were able to pull this off. They believed in the thesis, the vision, and the story, and you know, it helped quite a bit through that process and getting those backers on board. That Colligo in itself was such a great company, right? It really lowered the risk threshold in a sense that you know, the company, as I said, had tons of customers, enterprise grade customers, you know, low churn, mission critical products. And this was really coming in and helping it grow and, you know, preparing it and building it for the next, you know, 15, 20 years and figuring out how to do that. And so it actually was it was by no means an easy process running diligence and whatnot on any company. It's certainly challenging when you don't have a whole team working for you to pull it off, but so solid and the records were in such great shape and everything that made the process fairly seamless.
So in terms of buying a company, then, if someone was to ask you what are some of the lessons, some key takeaways about if someone was to go through with an acquisition, what are some key takeaways you would have for that person, regardless of industry, some things to watch out for?
Yeah, I get this one quite a bit, actually. Yeah. My response changes over time, but no, I think it's, you know, with any acquisition, it's uncovering the skeletons, right? You don't want to be surprised with anything after the fact. So I'm a big proponent, and this speaks largely to how I approach any work, but just going as deep and as thorough as you can with your diligence, putting in the work, not leaving any stone unturned. I think that's table stakes. Just you got to do that. You don't want to get in the door a week in or a month in and find something that you didn't know was there. The second would be black swan events are now on the table. So you certainly have to incorporate those into your model. And that's been a learning process, right? I mean, as much as it didn't affect us as many other businesses in the world, it still created some uncertainty and some, you know, right at the beginning of the pandemic, what's the next couple months going to look like that just aren't in a traditional environment. And so that's certainly, you know, bulletproofing, making your scenario, playing out the black swan in your scenarios, and being ready to make changes on the fly quicker. When you're looking at a company, you know, just having that extra plan in place. And then I would say, you know, the most important thing, and we luckily did this well, so I but I would share it as something everybody should do, is talk to the customers and the employees before the acquisition as part of the diligence process. So I was able to speak with many of the individuals from Colligo, and it certainly really helped convince me again that this was the right company to go into. Just a great team, really solid people that cared about what they did, cared about the customers. So that was fantastic. And then, talking to the customers themselves, it helps validate the product, and you can find out how mission critical something is when you speak to a few customers. And I think that really gave me further surety. And I think everybody should do that when they look at a potential acquisition.
So one thing is nowadays, I think, I feel like companies are priced to like a very
perfection.
Perfection.
Like valuations are high.
Valuations are insane, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like everything is just going to go to the moon, and it's going to go exactly
all that future
as
growth that's
yeah.
priced in.
So how would you go in, and then the people who are selling, often enough founders are attached to the company as well. How would you go in and try to negotiate the price, or what kind of negotiating tactics would you have to when you're buying a company, to have it more on your side, to cover your bases, to cover the black swan event? Because if it's a price of perfection, a black swan happens, and then you're off. That's it. It's done. You could have 30 plans, but sometimes it's not going to go through. So what would you say is something that like somebody should go in terms of negotiating, the way they should kind of treat that whole pricing part of that business purchase?
Yeah, I think, valuation and pricing is probably the hardest thing in the world to figure out what is the right price, right? I mean, traditional valuation would tell you, you can use a model for anything and figure out a price. And then, in reality, it's just what someone's willing to pay for something is the price of the right valuation. And it's probably somewhere in the middle. Yeah, I think what I would say is that you can't, if you're buying the right company and you've looked at many scenarios and your thesis is strong, the black swan event, especially in software, this doesn't necessarily apply to other businesses, doesn't really impact you that much in terms of what you should pay. If your software is truly mission critical, it's not one of those things that's getting cut as a line item by the CFO at your customers, then the black swan doesn't really affect you that much. And conversely, there's always a rebound, right? As we're learning from this pandemic, it's okay. Yes, there might have been a month or two where people were just pushing out purchasing decisions or sitting on their hands a little bit, and then IT's roared back stronger. The IT spending environments roared back stronger than possibly we've ever seen before. And that rebound is much bigger than the initial decline was in software world. And so on whole, your linear line, if you were to look over a normalized period, would actually be continuing on the same trend that was taking place before the pandemic. I think SaaS and globally is supposed to add another 20 billion. I didn't see the carnage that was associated with that, and some of the euphoria that was with that. But I did, I was just getting into the business world in university and whatnot around the 2007-2008 recession. Learned a ton from that, and then I've been working over the last decade and been able to see a lot of the events that have taken place there. So I think that. Yeah, do you mind if we try this one again? It's a loaded question.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah. It's just the age. So I'll leave the question, but just some of the challenges and some of the advantages of being a young CEO.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, no, I think definitely the advantages of being a young CEO is just the energy and the pace we can bring to the table. And I like to think this trickles down through the company. Hopefully it starts at the top, but we like to think we move faster and are more agile than any company out there, especially in our area of the market. And so we look at everything and see how we can just innovate on it. We come into things, looking to learn and eager to improve on everything that's out there. So we don't have any history and old ways of doing things that we're resting on our laurels, and we're able to just take that into everything we do. I think for myself, I go into everything just trying to learn and meet as many people as possible, and hopefully that transpires into the company having better output because of that. I think that there's a lot of downside too. Like I didn't work through the .com bubble. That was, I was fairly young when that took place, and so I wasn't able to learn from that experience like a lot of CEOs that have been around for a really long time have been. Conversely, I'm a student of everything and trying to outwork everybody in terms of the learning. So I've read about it and try and take it into everything I do and try and build upon that. But at the same time, it wasn't in my working experience. So that's definitely a downside, right? There's a lot of individuals out there that have that under their belt and have seen that, and especially as there'll be thoughts everywhere, and not necessarily my view that we're in bubbles in certain areas of the market. And so people who've been there and done that before can come into that with a little more perspective than perhaps a younger CEO can. Okay. But you know what? I think there's a lot to be said for attacking problems and coming in green, and just you know a lot more about what you don't know and are willing to learn more. And I think that is certainly an advantage that hopefully transpires through our company. So.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Nice. No, I was just gonna, like one of the things that it reminded me of was a lot of the CEOs that I come across when they're older. It's true. It's just you kind of, I don't know if it's you're stuck in your ways, but as you do get older, depending on the size of the firm, you're kind of you're more risk averse. And I feel like it's not just that you've gone through a lot. It's more like when you're younger, you're ready to run through a wall. So it's like, what, if I can't get around this, I'm just going to blast right through this. Right?
I do think you bring up a really good point, though, because I think especially people of our generation, we face so much disruption. To sit on your laurels and just, wait for something to come to you, I don't think that's something our generation can do. We just don't have that privilege. We can't just sit down and be like, oh, I'm going to work this job for 20 years. Because little do you know, you could be disrupted by some technology, some other company, etc., and your whole world could be turned upside down. So it's a very different time, I think, we live in now.
Yeah. So then,
absolutely. Yeah. So and I think our cohort's grown up in the software world, right? I mean, like we really started to use the internet and whatnot just as it was becoming widely available to the world, and we were able to learn from software 1.0 and then the second era of software, and see that evolve, and it's second nature to us because we grew up in that and using the tools and understanding what businesses need, what we needed, and I think we can almost resonate with our customers and colleagues better because of that. And as we enter the third era of software here, which I'd argue is delivering value to your customers by piecing together a lot more APIs and modules, it's like we can deliver on that value perhaps as well, or if not better, because we understand these tools and how they can make our lives better and make workers' lives better on a daily basis. So I certainly think that's an advantage that you hit on there.
Fantastic. All right, Tim, so now we'll move on to our success habits questions. So now our podcast is obviously called the 5 a.m. grind. We always like to ask our guests, so what time do you wake up in the morning? What's your morning routine like? Curious to hear that.
Yeah, I've always been an early riser, so I am, if not 5, it's 5:15, 5:30 at the latest as a sleep-in, but I'm an early riser. And morning routine, it's typically a workout, get in a quick workout right off the bat. I tend to try and get that in nice and early while catching up on work. If it's in the winter and I'm on the trainer with the bicycle, and you can almost do emails at the same time and get an early start to your day. And then I do employ some intermittent fasting where I won't eat breakfast until it's been a 12 plus hour window after my last meal, and I just think that lets you be super mentally sharp right off the bat when you wake up, and I've seen quite a bit of advantages from that, but it's a little bit on my morning routine. So
nice, fantastic. Do you so we also like to ask our guests, just like in terms of personal planning, development, even for your company, do you use any methods to plan out your entire year, monthly, weekly, do like personal productivity or just planning? Are you into that stuff?
Totally. Yeah, that's a loaded question. I feel like we could spend all day on that one. Yeah, so I do thinking blocks. Like I'll put thinking blocks in my calendar every week to make sure I have time to, step away, go think about the bigger picture, go plan the next, whether it's whatever the topic of that week is where I need to spend attention. So if it's planning the next week, planning the next month, planning that webinar that's in 6 weeks, planning the next 5 years, right? And I try to make sure I spend time doing that. And tools I use for that, I mean, it's pretty old fashioned in that sense. It's often just thinking and then taking notes on anything important. Nice. And planning it out that way. Obviously, like as a company, we plan things on a pretty rigorous basis using a bunch of software tools. But me personally, in terms of vision and strategy and ideas and where the world's going to be in 2 years, 10 years, it's a lot of scratch pad.
So when you're kind of stepping away and trying to get into that zone, are you just kind of locking your office door, or are you going for a hike? What are you doing to just kind of detach from the day-to-day operations and trying to see what you're missing essentially, or where you think everything is going? So what's your where's that physical space that accompanies a mental space?
Yeah, and I wish I could say it was easy enough to get away to go do a hike for that hour, 2 hour block, but unfortunately not the case at this point. But no, it's it's the office door. I guess in the remote world, it's the home office door. It's going out for a walk, or it can be the commute into the office. Just having that space where you just can get away from the computer for X amount of time that you've blocked out, and being able to just have that ability to flick the mindset into that mode. So
nice.
I mean, it's admittedly something you need to do much more of, and I could be better at myself. I mean, Bill Gates was famous for his thinking weeks. Yeah. I'd like to get to that at some point, but we're heavy in build and move fast mode, and so I don't have necessarily the time on my side to do that quite yet, but maybe eventually.
I think Warren Buffett has something similar where he says that your calendar should have a lot of empty time there, just to
Absolutely.
think through and figure everything out. And
yeah, so true. And then Tim, so the other one I like to ask a lot of people or guests that come on the show is that if someone is afraid to start a new business or embark on a new career, what advice would you give them? For someone just on the cusp of trying something, but they're just a little bit scared, what advice would you give them?
Just go for it. I mean, we have a phrase on our sales team: nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? And obviously, everything you got to take it within context, and it needs to be a calculated bet, of course. But you really, I think there's a couple of things I could chalk up to in my career that I've learned that have led me to be successful. But one of them is when there's opportunities, you need to take it. If you believe in it, you've done all your homework, you've truly fulfilled the work to be confident in that idea, and your gut's telling you yes, your head's telling you yes, your data's telling you yes, then you got to make that leap. So opportunities only come around that are right so often, and you got to capitalize on them.
Fantastic. So as an entrepreneur, I'm sure you deal with uncertainty all the time. How do you manage dealing with uncertainty? Because, there's that famous quote by JP Morgan, the only certainty in life is uncertainty. How do you deal with uncertainty on a day-to-day basis, just taking risks, etc.?
Absolutely. And, running a business, there's certainly no shortage of uncertainty. So it's something you become comfortable with, and you almost expect the longer you are in it, and I think it goes back to what we were discussing earlier a little bit too. It's, having the right data, having the right gut feeling, taking the indicators that you do know are factual in the environment, breaking things down to first principle thinking. Like here's what we know is true. Here's how we can deconstruct what, the perception in the market, the sentiment in the market, the what is unknown, and bring it back to what we do know, and then build from there. It's, start with what you do know, work towards creating a frame to put around that uncertainty so that it's, you do have higher probability of success within that uncertainty, and looking at all the options, right? I think a lot of people fail to evaluate what are the possibilities that could take place here, and let's prepare for each of those, and then align our chips, if you will, on the one that we think is most likely to take place, but be ready for all those. So then when X event happens in the uncertain environment, well, you were ready for it. You were unprepared, right? Or you were prepared. But we had a competitor recently that was acquired, and first question from investors and whatnot, was this a surprise to you? And the answer is no. I'd prepared, for this for months, thinking that something might take place in our market space. And so when it happened, I had the playbook ready to go. I think most people, in a lot of cases would have been caught flat-footed, but I had a hunch this was taking place. So I started doing the work on something taking place a little bit early, and, speaking to colleagues, what do you do if, X competitor gets acquired? What do talking to our board members about it, and just an example of something that may not even have ever taken place, but being prepared for a situation like that in which something may happen, just trying to cover all your bases and prepare for the unknown. So.
Got it. And last question here, just on success habits in general. When you look back at your life, any big failures or regrets that you have, lessons learned, and I don't really like to call them failures, but lessons learned that you could sort of impart to a lot of listeners who are sort of, entrepreneurs as well, trying to, move up in their career or just launching a new business. What are some lessons you would impart on some of these new budding entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I'm gonna twist the question from the answer a little bit on that one. So for me, it's been hard work, right? Everything I've accomplished in my career has always come down to me being able to try and outwork everyone else who is at the table for that position or for that role or that performance or that success. And it's really just been digging in, grit. I mean, there's no way around it. From as far as I'm concerned, it's always been my go-to way to try and achieve anything, right? It goes back to when you're a kid, building a little business on the corner, to sports, just outworking anybody else that's going for that position. Same thing, you guys went to good schools as well. It's like being competitive and trying to get into the good program. You got to outwork everybody and being successful there, and competing for that job at a school. You're often competing for one position, if maybe there's 10 positions in all of Canada with that firm, and you need to out hustle and outwork everybody to be better prepared. And I think the same thing goes, for being able to build a company. I mean, I take that with me, and I don't just work hard for the sake of working hard. It's obviously trying to work smart is often a big component of working hard, but making sure that's one of our secret pieces of our secret sauce, is just being able to outwork all our competitors, outwork everyone in the industry. And that's ultimately how we're going to win and build this into $100 million companies. We're going to work harder, we're going to work smarter. And so just applying that same principle that I've used my whole life, and making sure everyone in our culture and on our team also believes in, the value in hard work, and, in building something that, no one else has built before, or very few have ever built before. It's going to take a different level of dedication, focus, and hard work to get it done. And so that's something I would, there's no shortcuts to success, right? I think, it's a bit cliche, but I think it's true. You just got to put in the work and get it done.
All right. I love it. I think we can end it there. Yeah. Thank you so much. There are no shortcuts to success. I love it. All right.
I like it. Thank you guys.
So much.
It's been great.
Thank you so much, Tim.